Overall, I would say the M156 is a slightly... Hey everyone, this is Zach with 8020 Automotive, here today with a video on the most common Mercedes M156 engine problems. The Mercedes-Benz M156 engine is a high-revving, high-performance 6.2-liter naturally aspirated V8. It's certainly an exceptional performance engine and there aren't any question marks there. However, the M156 does have a number of well-known issues. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight in and talk about the most common problems with the Mercedes M156 V8. Number one on the list, we have head bolt issues. Head bolts are a well-known issue and something that really affected earlier models. Ultimately, head bolt issues resulted from the head bolts actually passing through some coolant channels, which could cause those head bolts to rust and ultimately for those bolts to eventually fail. And that would then allow the coolant to actually leak into the combustion chambers, which could cause low coolant misfires and potentially some steam from the exhaust. After 2011, Mercedes did update these parts, so this is mostly a non-issue for later M156 engines, which at that point were pretty much only found in the C63 AMG. Otherwise, if you have an earlier year model, then it might be worth it to address the head bolts preventatively, or at the least, if you're ever in the area of those head bolts and they've never been replaced, then it certainly doesn't hurt to go ahead and knock that out when you have some overlap in that labor. Moving on to number two on the list, we have Valvetrain issues, and I've simply lumped a couple things together. So a few things to be on the lookout for are the camshafts themselves, as well as the lifters, the cam adjusters, and the cam hall sensors. These can all be fairly common issues related to the Valvetrain, and unfortunately this can be a labor-intensive job to replace any of this, and some of these parts, especially like the camshafts, can be rather expensive. Now, none of these problems individually are extremely common, but again, there are a few different things within that cylinder head and with that Valvetrain specifically that can go wrong. If you're in there already paying for the labor, it might make sense to go ahead and replace some more of that preventatively. So again, something to be on the lookout for, and unfortunately, one of those more costly and complex issues. Moving on to our third common problem, we have issues with the idler pulleys. Now, this is fairly straightforward and a relatively minor issue in the grand scheme. Mercedes is known to have issues with idler pulleys, not just on the M156, but this is something that affects many different Mercedes engines. So nothing new here, but still something to be on the lookout for, especially in roughly the 60 to 80,000 mile ballpark. That tends to be when these idler pulleys start going bad and requiring replacement. Now, one thing to mention here is a lot of the times this isn't necessarily an urgent fix, but if those idler pulleys fail enough and cause any damage to the belt, that can also cause further damage and ultimately take out the thermostat and the port going to that. So that could add a few extra things to replace if you don't catch this in time. So if you start running into any signs or symptoms of idler pulley issues, definitely a good time to address that and get those replaced. And also not a bad idea just to have them checked during any standard maintenance or oil changes, whatever it may be. Moving on to common problem number four, we have oil leaks. Much like with the Valvetrain problems, I'm also lumping a few things in here with oil leaks. So some of the most common oil leaks to be on the lookout for are going to include the oil filter housing gasket, the valve cover gaskets, and also some O-rings on the oil lines. This is a pretty simple issue. Tons of high performance engines and especially tons of German engines just run into oil leaks. And that's especially true when you make it north of that 8-year, roughly 80 to 100,000 mile ballpark, which most M156 engines are going to be into nowadays. Simply these gaskets, O-rings, all of that kind of stuff just wears down, degrades with age and mileage, and begins cracking and causing those oil leaks. Last but not least on the list here, at number 5, we have problems with the intake manifold. Now, there are a few different ways in which the manifold can fail or have issues on the M156, and it is known to crack, leak, and additionally the intake manifold actually houses the two throttle bodies within it, so that just leaves a lot of room for potential failures involving the intake manifold. The biggest downside to running into any issues with the intake manifold is because it houses those two throttle bodies. It can be very expensive to replace, especially if you're looking for a brand new OEM one, and they can also be challenging to track down, so you'll likely have to find a used one in good condition, which can help save you a lot of money. There are some repair kits and different things out there that can help sturdy up the intake manifold and prevent you from running into issues. So again, something here that's not worth replacing preventatively or anything. Now, with all of these M156 common problems out of the way, tying that all together and summarizing it and talking about M156 reliability a little bit, overall, I would say the M156 is a slightly below average to average reliability. Ultimately, that's not a terrible thing for, again, a high performance, high revving engine. That's simply the nature of a lot of high performance engines. They are going to require a little extra TLC. They are going to cost a little bit more to maintain and perform any repairs on. So that's one of the downsides of owning an M156. But again, it's stuff that can be said for a lot of different high performance engines. Really, the biggest things that bring down the overall reliability are the Valvetrain issues, the head bolts, as well as the intake manifold. Other than that, a lot of the problems experienced on the M156 are fairly simple and things that can be common on many different engines and vehicles, especially as they continue aging. And that's those things like pulleys, belts, oil leaks, etc. Anyway, guys, that wraps up our video for today. If you appreciated the content, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more in the future. Thanks, everyone.